Sajid, let me come to you. Plenty of conversations on digital infrastructure, plenty of conversations around energy security, energy resilience, and the move towards clean energy. How are you looking at India, and what does it mean from an investment standpoint for you today?
So we're a permanent capital investor. So I think our view of India has always been about when, not if. And I think the idea...
So has the time come?
I think our view is that the time has come. And, we've evaluated investments in India going back almost 15 years. And I think our view now is there's two focuses where you can provide sort of the underpinnings for the digital transformation, and that's really in the kind of brick and mortar infrastructure. So that's in the data centers that provide the compute and storage capabilities. That's in the fiber networks that connect the data centers, that connect home broadband. India is largely an unpenetrated home broadband network. And partly that's due to the fact that there's been a sort of a jump to mobile first. Yeah. But at the end of the day, mobile needs kind of a backbone in a fixed network. And so our view is the brick and mortar type of infrastructure is what's required, and will require hundreds of billions of dollars, not just in...
So how much of the hundreds of billions of dollars that is required are you willing to put in?
I think we view India as our second most important kind of market after the U.S., and it's largely not because we have a desire or a sort of a need to invest in emerging markets, but we have a desire to chase growth. And I think India provides sort of unfettered kind of dollar return growth.
Well, that's always good to hear from a CEO's perspective when they're looking at investors talking about chasing growth. But Nick, the India story, I think there is unanimity on the panel that this is our time, and it is our time to sort of boldly move ahead in an AI era. How do you look at the story?
Thanks, Shereen. I think one of the things for those of us who grew up in India, like Bipul and myself, and left, more than 30 years ago, when you come back over time, you start to see things which may not be as noticeable when you're even living here. And I would say we've seen more change in the last 5 years than we saw probably in the last 20, and a credit to what John and Mukesh have built, because it's more than a business partnership. It truly is a strategic partnership, which takes into account things like national security and a number of other areas. At the Brunswick Group, what we do is advise a number of companies on a range of critical issues, and there's no more critical issue when it comes to both the digital infrastructure and the physical infrastructure. To Sachin's point, it's the combination of both, which you rarely see happen in one place. So whether that's in energy, whether that's in financial services, whether that's in a supply chain, whether it's hitting everything all at once. And those companies that are well positioned to capitalize on the changes in both are really going to leap ahead, if you will. And I think in what you've seen and what I see certainly every time I come back here is I notice changes which I never would have seen earlier. We had a great statistic this morning about women in bank accounts and how many women now have bank accounts. We saw great, you hear little tidbits which you now notice and you see anecdotally and you see in the data, which realizes as much potential that's being realized. There's still so much more opportunity, especially if the two countries can partner together at a strategic level.
Vaishali, let me come back to you now. On the US-India clean energy roadmap, there is a lot of work that's already underway. But what are the next steps that you would like to see both sides work on, besides trade that you already spoke of?
Sure. Now, I think on the supply chain side, we have a lot to do. On the manufacturing side, I think we really need to ensure we can leverage what the US can do as a part of even IRA. Like, for example, let me take an example, solar panels. Perhaps they can be manufactured in the US, but in India, we can manufacture the rest. But can we leverage, like, can panels be on India's list? Can the other, we get subsidies or the IRA benefits in the US? That's one area. I think green hydrogen is another area where, of course, a lot of sort of incentives are there from the IRA, but we haven't seen the momentum pick up as much, I think, in India. So perhaps a lot more can be done to ensure we work on electrolyzers and other areas which can feed in for the solutions and scale. Capital, I think, is a very important issue. I think my belief is over the last decade or so, capital hasn't been as aggressive as it must to be able to fuel the growth in this sector.
Well,
so
hopefully Sachin's going to help change that, aren't you?
data centers, I mean, like data centers, we green data centers, so we can work together for sure. Sachin, but yeah, of course we will, of course. And capital, I think we have about $8 trillion of capital to be unlocked. I think we need to be a lot more innovative. And I think we're talking a lot at the high level, but how can we put blended finance to use in India? And so, yeah, these are some of the areas which I feel are quite critical for us to be able to push forward. And I really do believe, Shereen, that even in India we are seeing that, traditional renewables like solar, wind and hydro are only good, they go only so far. But we really have to become more complex and kind of marry things together. We have to do that as far as different geographies are concerned. So, we need to get competitive and yet collaborative.
John, the final words to you. Plenty of opportunities, plenty of convergence, especially over the past 2 decades in moving and building this relationship, reaffirming trust, reaffirming the partnership. Some of the irritants continue to be addressed, hopefully, over time. But, big picture, your final comments before we let you go.
I don't think we're dreaming big enough. Because every time we've talked about what's possible in your sessions, we ended up overachieving that. And when you set the large dreams, you've got to say, what are your hurdles to get over in order to achieve them? And we've hit a number of them. I think we have to realize that growing the economy 6 to 7% a year doesn't meet the economic engine that we need to create for 1.2 million jobs. It doesn't get the bottom third of society growing at the rate we want. I like what the administration has done the first 100 days in this next year in terms of the approach, but I think we've got to think more out of the box on what's going to be possible. I do believe that India, it is their century. And it's our century together that we're, with the U.S. and India working together, we can drive the U.S. economy by incrementally 1 more percentage point on GDP, and India's by 2. We've got to realize with AI, the majority of companies that exist today will not exist on the Fortune 500 list in their geography 10 years from now. If you don't change, you get left behind. We have to generate, to Mukesh's point, $100 billion, and it will not be easy of FDI and flow. The companies have to acquire more resources both here and in the U.S. in terms of the direction. We have to take the national policies and move them down to all 28, 29 states. And each one of them has to have ownership in terms of the direction. But it is India's decade. You will be the largest economy in the world. We will control how fast it will occur. We've got to dream bigger, but we got to deal with the problems. The neat thing about this administration is when they talk about, they don't want to just hear the good things. We've heard this again and again. Tell us the hurdles, and it's one of the few groups that when you give them the hurdles, whether it's the Prime Minister level, whether it's Jay Shanker's letter, whether it's at any of the people we've talked to, they say, tell us what we have to do more of and where we have to improve. So my takeaway is dream bigger. It's a future of the world that I think India will help drive more than any other country in the world.
Well, that's the perfect close. Dream bigger. That's the aspiration for this defining partnership, defining relationship, and lots of areas of collaboration, potential collaboration, existing collaboration and future collaboration as well, to ensure that both sides benefit from this partnership. John and everyone else here on this panel, appreciate you joining us here today at the USISPF Leadership Summit to take us through what the future holds for the US-India relationship. Many thanks for your time and for your insights. With that, it is time for us to wrap up this CNBC-TV18 special from all of us here on the team. For now, goodbye. Many thanks for watching. Do stay tuned. There's a lot more coming right up.